At this point, I'm going to introduce Jeff Anderson from Make Cars Graduate School of Business, and turn it over to
Mine?
you.
Thank you.
You're all on. Thank you.
So 1 minute of propaganda about the school before we launch into the presentation. I promise 1 minute. So for those of you who don't know or aren't familiar with Lake Forest, we're a 70-year-old nonprofit, fully accredited educational institution. What makes us unique is we are the only business school in the United States that has a faculty comprised 100% of youth. So every night there are people like you in the classroom delivering our content. We have two parts of the business. We offer degree programs, a Master's of Business Administration and a Master's of Science in Management. And we also have a very large and rapidly growing business where we develop highly customized learning programs for all kinds of organizations around the country. So that's, as I said, 1 minute of propaganda. Thank you for the opportunity to come out and interact with you. Since it's raining, I can't play golf anyway. So we're going to talk about derailment this morning. There's a little worksheet on the table. I'll get to that in a little while. Don't worry about it. I'll explain it. But derailment, I've done this presentation around the world, and I've discovered that derailment actually doesn't even have a translation in some languages. It's such an odd word. So I thought we'd start with just a little definition. Derail, to cause to run off the rails, but the second part of the definition is even better, I think, to obstruct the progress of. And that happens to careers, doesn't it? We've all seen it, really talented people plugging along, and then all of a sudden, they plateau, or something sort of obstructs the continued progress of that career. It also, by the way, happens to businesses, where great businesses with a wonderful brand hit a plateau where something gets in their way, often related to the leadership behaviors of leaders in the business. So it's an interesting topic, and someone, when I was giving this presentation years ago, said, why do you focus on this? Why, of all the things you can talk about in leadership, why derailment? Interesting question, right? So, first reason is, unfortunately, there's a lot of leadership failure, right? Let's do a little experiment here. So, I want you to spend a minute, try to add up, come up with a number of the total number of different people you've worked for in your career. Just take a minute and come up with an estimate. For those of us who are a little older, it takes a while, a big number, right? Everyone got just sort of a guess? Now I want you to think about, this is where it gets fun, how many of those people would you not want to work for again? Okay, everyone's kind of going through seeing some faces of people they've worked for. Now, since this is a finance group, we're going to do a little math. Compute the percentage. What percentage of all the people you've worked for in your career would you not want to work for again? Rough estimate, okay? Now I want to see a show of hands. How many people have a number that's sort of 0 to 20%? 20 to 40? 40 to 60? 60 or above. It's kind of depressing, isn't it? But it's really interesting. You see where all the hands were? In that sort of 40 to 60 or around 50% range? Well, what's interesting is there's been a lot of research on this topic. Most of you can't read this, but if you go look at the prominent research on leadership failure, different methodologies by different people, but if you look across all those studies, the average is about 50%. So about 50% of the people who are in leadership roles will, quote, fail by some definition or another. So the second reason I like to talk about this is there's a guy named Louis Quast at the University of Minnesota who does a lot of research on derailment. He's been able to show that just being aware of what your risks are makes you 7 times less likely to fall prey to them, even if you don't make any conscious behavior changes, just awareness can help keep you from being tripped up. So that's a little more optimistic, right? This is the fun part. And maybe the major reason I like to talk about. Getting an accurate sense of self is really difficult. There's this guy named David Dunning at Cornell who wrote this famous paper titled Unskilled and Unaware. And what he has been able to demonstrate is the deficiencies we have that make us bad at something make it impossible for us to know we're bad at it. Let that sink in a minute. So if I can't write a grammatically correct paragraph, I can't look at my work and know that it's bad. Or here's a little more personal example. Years and years ago, we bought this bookshelf from IKEA. And I'm in this bedroom by myself trying to put it together. Anyone had that experience? And I'm toiling away and I'm feeling pretty good about the progress I'm making, right? My 7-year-old son comes in there, by the way, he's an engineer today. And he looks at it and he gives Dad this horrified look. And he basically says, "Get out of here." He doesn't even look at the directions. He sort of takes apart what I did, assembles it in the proper way, right? But in my own little bubble, without some external force, I had no idea, really, that I have absolutely no vocabulary. Now, my wife, by the way, reminds me almost every day for 35 years. So I know because I get a lot of external help. But without that, if any of us were just to think about this on the way home on our own, it's very unlikely we would accurately capture what our own risks are. Does that make some sense? So those bosses you thought about a few minutes ago that you would not want to work for again, what was it about them? What were the attributes or behaviors? Yes?
A couple of them I'm thinking of, they did exactly what they expected of me in terms of hard work, competency, staying relevant, and supporting, like I would like to do to the people who report to me.
So those are the people you would want to work for.
Yes.
How about people you wouldn't want to work for? What behaviors or attributes? Micromanagement. And what? Rigid? Is that inflexible?
Didn't care about me.
Yeah, didn't have a genuine interest in you.
Bad communicator.
Bad communicator?
Worst of all, truthfulness.
Worst, what? Say more about that.
I've worked for some people that were trust and truthful. You did not like that.
Absolutely.
Less than truthful.
Integrity kind of issue, probably. What else would be on that list? Condescending?
Narcissist.
Narcissist? Adding to the depression of the morning here.
You said you wanted to answer.
Yeah, well, unvarnished truth this morning. The doors are closed. We're being honest to each other. Anything else? Yes.
I've thought of a couple, bullying and yelling.
Yes. Yeah, we're going to come back to the yelling thing in a minute. That's a really interesting one. So it's interesting. So starting more than 40 years ago, the Center for Creative Leadership was the pioneer in doing research on derailment. And what they did, and many organizations have done since then, is they'd go into organizations that hired large cohorts of people at the same time. So Ron and I can relate to this from our days many years ago at Arthur Young, right? And what they would do is they would follow these people for 25 or 30 years. Every year they'd go into the organization and they'd say, who got passed over for promotion, who was demoted, who was fired, who's having issues. And then they'd go interview the people that worked with them to try to discern what was it about Jeff that caused him to be passed over multiple times. And they would then aggregate these behaviors to come up with a pattern of what are the most common derailment risks. If you line up all of these studies, interestingly, and you look across all of them, the same 7 things show up every time. Not 15 things, not 2, 7 things. Just as reliable as anything you can imagine. Here they are. This should sound familiar or relate to some of the things you mentioned a minute ago. Poor emotional control. Talk about yelling, right? Anyone who's ever worked for a boss who has this issue, you never forget that exchange. All right? Number 2, integrity and consistency issues. Integrity issues is a complicated one. And so think about it as consistency, that I don't do what I say I'm going to do. I don't live up to the standards that I expect everyone else to behave to. Very common. Number 3, difficulty building and leading a team. They might be a great individual contributor, but they don't have a clue how to build and lead a team. Most of us have experienced that. Number 4, relationship issues. In the work that I've been doing the last 16 years advising business executives, this is the second most common thing that I encounter. I go in, work with a senior executive, and I find immediately that he or she has all kinds of relationship issues, usually with their peers in the organization. A narrow perspective. I'm chugging away, I'm doing this, but when I have to think more broadly about the organization or operate across organizational boundaries, I'm just not able to or do it effectively. There it is. Micromanagement. Who said that? You said that. This is a disease, folks, in the world of business. Frankly, it is a disease. And I encounter it every single place that I go. We'll come back and talk about maybe why that is. And then finally, just unable to adapt to changes in the marketplace, unable to adapt to different demands of different positions in the organization, just not as agile. So here's the question. If these 7 things show up all the time, and what you identify line up under all those buckets. So if they're that consistent, where do they come from? Where do they come from? They're that predictable and that reliable, and we've all experienced. What's the source, the genesis of those traits or behaviors? What do you think? Pardon me?
Whoever trained you.
Yeah, right. I mean, you've sort of developed habits from those who went before you.
I say we blame our parents.
Yeah, I like that. It's a little bit of nurture, right? Yes, sir.
I blame myself. Maybe I wasn't as aware of these, but where's the pushback if I have to look in the mirror? So I guess I blame myself that I allow this to happen, or that if I would have known about this as I'm interviewing for a new position, to the best ability of mine, I would try to look for these and try to find out if these are something that you're going to walk into and be derailed.
So if it's something that is you, and I have mine, and Tom has his, and Craig has his, what's the source?
Fear.
Fear?
My perspective is a lot of these you don't learn as an individual contributor, and you're actually rewarded for some of the negative behaviors in here. It's sort of aggressive, narrow-focused driver. And as you get up into a leadership position and you don't shed those, you bring those practices with you, and they don't work at a senior executive level.
Yes, sir.
Survival?
Survival, a little bit.
Insecurity.
Security. So there's this guy named Robert Hogan who started this company, Hogan Assessments. Some of you have probably taken the Hogan Assessment instruments, and he thought hard about this several years ago. And he asked himself that question: where does this stuff come from? And his conclusion, which I agree with, is it's part of our innate personality, right? And his hypothesis is that we all have 2 sides to our personality. We sort of have that everyday normal personality, which shows up 95% of the time, but we also have this evil cousin. He calls it the dark side, right? And that dark side shows up when, in two situations, when we're under pressure. Interestingly, the other time it shows up is when we are in a really familiar setting, right? So I think about my wife of 35 years, and she doesn't always see the best of things. And what's common about those two situations, we are not as actively managing ourselves and our impressions. What I think is interesting is combine the two of those. And that's why we see these things so prominently at senior levels of organizations. Lots of pressure all the time. And often it's a very familiar setting. A person may have been with the organization or with his or her colleagues a very long time. And so they don't try to manage themselves. Does that make some sense? So what we want to do, I want to spend some time helping each one of you do a little assessment of what your risks are. So I developed a little non-scientific way of trying to at least get a handle directionally on what your risks might be. So in the middle of your table is a worksheet that looks like this. Okay? Does everyone have one of those? And what it does is for each one of those identified derailment risks, it has 4 categories. What I'm going to do is I'm going to flash up each one of them. I'm going to ask a series of questions for you to think about of yourself. And based on how you answer them, it's going to either push you to the right side of the scale, i.e. it's a higher risk, or it's going to push you to the left side of the scale, a lower risk. Does that make some sense? And then at the end, I'm going to ask you, okay, based on all these questions for emotional control, where do you think you are? Everyone in this room has at least one that's in the high-risk category. So as you're doing your self-evaluation, and you're saying, oh, I think it's a moderate risk, and you haven't given yourself a high risk yet, think a little harder. Okay? So let's do the first one just to make sure we sort of get in the habit and make sense of what I'm doing. For emotional control, are you often irritated by the faults of other people? When people let you down, when they don't meet their commitments, when their work is subpar, does that just get under your skin in a nanosecond, right? If it does, that pushes you to the right side of the scale. Number 2. This was as diplomatic as I could say it. Are you prone to outward expressions of your stress? That doesn't mean you yell, but you might be short with people, right? You might pound on the table, but somehow it comes out explicitly. If so, you're on the right side of the scale. And the third one would others experience you as moody or unpredictable? So maybe it doesn't come out as yelling, but people can watch you and they can sort of see that your moods are on sort of a roller coaster rather than being even. Those 3 make sense to everyone? So based on sort of an overall collection of your assessment on those 3, I want you to check one of the boxes for the first item. I'm looking at my colleague Tom here and I'm saying, what did Tom say?
Italians have things that are against them.
Yeah, heritage. That's where it comes from. It's heritage, right? Ready to move on? All right, number 2. Do you enjoy going against the rules? Not just are you willing to. Do you enjoy it? I do. Nothing more that I love than figuring out how to just explode some crazy bureaucratic process, right? It's a sport for me. not always good, right? Because people don't know how to read it. There's some consistency issues that can cause for me. So that pushes you to the right. Would other people describe you as competitive and ambitious? Right? If you're trying to get ahead and you're pushing for the result, and you're just naturally a competitive person, that puts you actually at greater risk for this issue, pushes you to the right side of the scale. On the other hand, if when you make up your mind, you don't change it often, it actually lowers your risk. That should make some sense, right? If you make up your mind and you stick to it, it's unlikely people are going to perceive you as inconsistent, right? This is a hard one, so people got a good guess, or are you still sort of wavering? Got a good guess? All right, that's the hardest one. They get more fun, I think. Number 3, difficulty leading and building a team. Do you like to be in the spotlight? If you really enjoy being in the spotlight and you like having it be about you, you're at increased risk of being not as effective team leader. There's a great book that Coach K from Duke wrote years ago, and in the middle of this book is this quote that no one talks about, which I find fascinating, and he says, "Sometimes I need to show my team the face they need to see," which means it's never about him. It doesn't matter if he's tired or angry or irritated or excited. He's always thinking about what did they need from me. So it's sort of the opposite of that risk. Make sense? Do you readily seek out the opinions of other people, and when things go well, is it just your natural instinct to share the credit? This is one that I've learned we are a little too easy on ourselves, that we all like to think that we share the credit easily, but actually precious few people do. So try to be honest on that one. When you think about the relationships that you have in the workplace, what do you value more? Harmony in the relationship, which pushes you to the lower risk side, or is directness and being forthright more important to you, which pushes you more to the right side of things? A story to illustrate this. So when our third child, a daughter, was going through her teenage years, and she and her mother would have the conversations that happen periodically between mom and daughter, right? Usually at a high decibel. I didn't even want to be in the house. I don't even matter what they were talking about. I want harmony in the house, right? And so in my case, that pushes me to left because I'm just so focused on harmony in relationships. Make sense? Everyone got a guess on that one? Relationship issues, because as I said before, it's so prevalent, this one got 4 statements rather than 3. So, do you prefer to work alone? Socially, do you like going to big interactions like this, or is your preference really to socialize with a smaller group of close friends or family? That pushes you to the right. How would others describe you? Confident and competitive, which is on the right side, or modest and cooperative, the left side? Are you extremely confident in your views and opinions? This is another one where we probably don't judge ourselves as accurately as we could, so think hard about that. Pardon me? Yeah. Would others describe you as warm and likable? That one carries more weight than the other 4, the other 3. I do another talk, that's probably the one that I enjoy the most, about how other people form impressions of us. And just so happens that all of us are walking around with a 2x2 matrix in our head. If there's any consultants in the room, it's wonderful, the 2x2. And we judge people based on competence and warmth. And warmth carries more weight. It is the first thing we always judge. So that last statement about would others describe you as warm and likable is a really powerful indicator of is this a risk for you or not. Are we cool with this one? Everyone got a guess? Narrow perspective. Do the details matter a lot to you? If you're sitting here thinking, why is he not using bullet points on his presentation? Instead, he's using these stupid little squiggly things, right? You are on the right side of this chart. That hit a chord, I think. Huh? Do you have a wide variety of interests? Or are you like me where I just want to watch the Golf Channel every day? I don't care about anything else. Do you have a strong curiosity about how things work? Were you the kind of person when you were growing up that took things apart just to see how they worked? I didn't, as I said before, because I wouldn't have known how to get them back together, right? And I really didn't care. Here's another one I didn't add, but I could. Do you do crossword puzzles or Sudoku puzzles? If the answer is yes, it pushes you to the left side of this lower risk. How many people do them? How many people never do them? In my case, I don't do them because I think, what's the point? Where's it leading?
Right.
Right? But you can see that there's this interest in intellectual games says something about how broad your perspective is, actually. Make sense? All right, we're almost there. This is the one we talked about before. Micromanagement. Do you often have this thought, it's easier if I just do this? Right? I'll just do it. Right? More efficient. We don't have to go back and forth 5 times. I'll just write the memo, give it to me. Would others describe you as a perfectionist? There's a lot of finance people in this room. That one should hit a chord, right? Do people easily and quickly trust you? That pushes you to the lower risk side of things. Remember, this is the disease out there. More of us fall prey to it than we are aware. So take an extra moment and look at these questions and think about it. And sort of make an honest judgment of what your individual risk is. Ready to move on? Everyone got a guess on this one? Failure to adapt, last one. Would others describe you as spontaneous and flexible? When you go on vacation, you just pick a place and you just see what happens every day? Or are you like my wife and you plan fun? I don't know how you can plan fun, but she does, so. When you think about change, does that energize you or stress you? And finally, I would modify that to say, would others describe you as a good listener? With me on this one? So here's what I'd like to do now. If we're in the mood to share, I'd like to have you take about 10 minutes. Talk with your colleagues at your table. Share what you think your principal risks are and see if there's a pattern at the table. There's 1 or 2 that seem to pop to the top. And then I want to sort of go around and we'll do a sort of sense of the group. Because what I've found when I have done this talk with people from different disciplines, there actually is usually a noticeable pattern that emerges. Make sense? So have fun sharing. 10 minutes. Go.
Everybody or?
Okay. Let's do this. I just want to go around and I want to see if there's a pattern, whatever, at each table, and see what that, and then we'll have a discussion about, can we make any sense of that? Is there a pattern? Why? What do we do about it? So let's start here.
Yes, our two categories that had high risk or moderate risk were micromanagement and failure to adapt. By far, those were the two biggest ones.
Interesting. Back there? What was that?
We derailed our conversation.
I think it's a common theme, though, that when you're doing this, you kind of go back and forth, and maybe it's almost an unconscious thing that you don't want to find yourself on a far right
Yeah, we
far
don't.
off.
Right.
So it's good to have that self-reflection.
I think Mike's observation was interesting about when you think about your peers versus you think about leadership or other organizations as part of the company.
I cheated and I split your relationship into the two halves, managing up and managing across.
Okay.
We talked about the difference. I use mine, individual roles, managing within a peer group with your staff is one way, and managing up in the corporate environment is, I find it different.
Right.
I agree with myself on those two.
So was there a pattern, top two at your table? It's okay if there wasn't a pattern.
Relationships and micromanagement.
Okay. How about over here?
You know, I'm going to go out on a limb and say because we didn't get a consensus at the table, that we have an overall problem with difficulty building and leading teams.
A lot of disagreement.
Maybe a relationship issue.
Classic. I'll think about that all day now. This table.
We had, the top was the micromanagement, and then the second was narrow perspective.
Okay. Over here. No
I
pattern?
think we're all over.
Yeah.
So, I don't know if there's anything convincing, but the micromanagement and narrow perspective popped up a couple tables, and I'll bet several of you have that. Why do you think that is? I saw exactly the same pattern when I've done this talk with technology users. Why? Why? I think there's something about the discipline that we have chosen. I'm a finance person originally, so I'm in the soup with you.
I mean, some of it is the way we grew up and trained. I mean, a lot of us accountants or public accountants, and there was that, that set way it was going to go through the 4 or 5 levels of review, and there were absolutely no exceptions. And then it's, kind of transferring that into the other world that people don't get that, that level of diligence, and that's micromanagement. Or most people who are not familiar with that world absolutely say it's micromanagement.
Right, we're subject matter experts.
Here we go.
Right.
Accounting and finance specifically have to be extremely detail oriented, and I feel like a lot of it has to do with maybe people's interest or lack of interest in taking risks.
Yeah, there's a risk-taking element in there. Right. That. Yes, sir.
The other thing I've thought about too is I've been involved with this. I've had tons of deadlines, reporting deadlines to the government, to the board of directors, to whoever, and they're always throughout the month. And if you're lucky to take a vacation the last week of the month, whereas my sales partners, it's 3 o'clock. Oh, we're going to cut off for the day, or
Go play golf, right?
We're going to take 3 weeks off. But they don't have these, in my opinion, or what I've seen, they don't have those types of deadlines that can't be pushed aside. It's like, you got to come back to work. You got to work. Whereas maybe it's a little bit of bias on my part, but I think there's a little bit of that that's involved there. I mean, we have to be top of performance, peak performance, deadline oriented all the time, 12 times out of a year. And I just think that, that's why you almost have to narrowly micromanage this, so you get in trouble. And they'll see within a month, if you miss a deadline, you're gonna feel it. You miss a sales deadline, we got the quarter to catch up. So, just,
We're fiduciaries. Any mistakes are fatal mistakes.
Right. But, so I'm gonna personalize it. I run a regulated entity, right? And we have all kinds of stuff in the report and data and filing deadlines and I'm ultimately responsible, right? If we miss them. Tom, do I have a checklist of every filing deadline and do I know when they are?
You better.
I absolutely don't. And I don't care. So here's the visual that I use sometimes. Any football fans in here? So this weekend, when you're watching the football game, at some point in time, I guarantee you, they'll take a shot of the quarterback who just came off the field. He's sitting on the bench, he's got the headphones on, he's talking to people in the press box. Used to be he was looking at film, now he's looking at a Surface tablet, right? He's looking at formations of the defense, and they're having a conversation about what they're going to do the next time they're on the field. It's a really critical thing they're planning. The head coach is not involved in that conversation. He doesn't have any clue what they're talking about or what they decide to do. What he does know, that he's hired someone he has confidence in to have that conversation and make the right decisions. That's the struggle that we all deal with. We all are on this, I think of it as a journey that we all started in some functional discipline. I'm a CPA, I'm a finance person, and we're rewarded early on for how good we are at that. But at some point, there's this huge switch that says, we can't be the expert anymore. I would love to drive my friend Tom crazy every day and show him what a great finance person I am, but that's not my job. And that transition snares a lot of us. And it's one of the reasons why when I get to highly technical occupations, you find it to be more of a briar nest, if you will, briar patch, than in other functions. I don't find the same thing in sales. So the test I also use is right now, as we speak, the school has salespeople, they have people delivering important programs, and it has salespeople making really important presentations to customers about additional business. I have absolutely no idea what's going on in either one of those situations. No. Don't know how they're pitching to the customer, don't know who the faculty members are that are presenting today, but I do know that I have really great people that I have confidence in all of those. So that's a little bit of the why, and maybe a secret for you to how to break that as a full. Yes, sir.
So in order for you to get to the level where you could break that apart with your analogy, I really enjoyed, who helped you, or what was the defining moment where you realized you could take a step back and you had the right people in the right place to get done what you wanted?
Good question. I was lucky because I had this really pivotal experience in my career. So I'm a corporate finance guy. I'm in a very big industrial company here in Chicago. I'm running strategic planning and M&A, and the CEO says to me, I want you to go run a manufacturing plant. So I come home, I tell my wife, we move to Spartanburg, South Carolina, and I duck. And I remember driving into the parking lot the first day thinking, I don't know anything about this. I can't help them solve any of the problems that we're going to encounter today. None. Everything about leadership changes that. How you pick your team, how you spend your time, how you make decisions, how you involve others in making decisions. And that was sort of the aha moment for me. And if I'm really honest, that's sort of what propelled me to want to get into this whole world of leadership development to help other people discover this same aha moment, right? I will often tell clients I work with, how would you act if you knew nothing about this business? If you put that sort of filter on things, I think you would find, boy, I might be leading differently than I instinctively. Does that make some sense? What other questions about this? The most common question I get at this point is, all right, how do I, if you had to give us one secret to manage our risk, what would it be? Anyone got any suggestions?
I think we had a good conversation here that I think that it's a hard question. But I think that for me, what was missing was what's next. And what about, okay, I have this high risk or this moderate risk, but am I aware of it? And what am I doing to manage that risk? I think that's probably the critical part of it, right? To manage the potential risk. Awareness.
Any thoughts about one thing you could do? If I've made the sale this morning, and you're going to walk out of here and say, I'm going to do something to try to mitigate whatever my natural risk might be, what might you do?
Be aware.
Be aware?
Listen.
Listen, that's one. Yes, sir?
So self-awareness is the first step. I know people and myself that have found someone they trust to tell them when they see that happen. You need a partner to catch you and give you that warning sign that you're in that behavior.
That's a really good suggestion. Level with your team, too. Say, hey, here's my tendencies. You have permission to raise your arms, and Jeff, when you're going too much against the rules and we got enough on our plate, let us know. It's a great one.
Okay.
So here's what happened. So remember the setting, final round, Sunday. Phil Mickelson's walking up the 18th fairway. The crowd's going crazy. Everyone loves Phil, right? And one commentator says, he's only thinking about two things right now. The pace at which he's walking and the rate of his breathing. And the other commentator says, yeah, Tom Watson once told me he didn't learn how to win until he learned how to control it. If you go to a professional golf tournament, watch how slowly they walk. They do it on purpose, to slow themselves down physiologically, so they can take in everything that's happening. They can make the decision they need to make in spite of the craziness going on around them, and then execute as well as they can. Do we do that in the world of business? What do? We do what I did. I'm having a conference call this morning, right? On my way here, which finishes up about 5 seconds before I get out of my car in the parking lot, right? I rush in here to get ready. Isn't that our lives? Right. When we do that, what's the likelihood we will show up in the way that we want to? That we've made a conscious choice about how we're going to show up and how we're going to behave in this instance. It's pretty low. There's actually been research on world-class tennis players where they put heart rate monitors on them, and when they get to the most critical point in the match, their heart rate goes down. They've trained themselves. So what I would leave with you is the single most important thing that you can do, now that you're aware, to help you manage your risks, is to slow down the pace at which you operate. The fact that people can look at our calendars now and pop stuff in them is one of the worst possible things that ever happened in the world of business, right? So do whatever you can to not be back, even if you just need 30 seconds to be late. Does that make some sense? All right, we have about 5 minutes left. Somehow magically we sort of got to the finish line here on that. Any other thoughts, questions about this whole issue of derailment? Anything I can help with? Yes, sir.
Do you find corporations investing in programs or even seminars for their employees or their executives to make them aware of this?
Do we, Roberta?
Yes, we do. Yeah.
Increasingly. And what we're increasingly finding, and we've convinced a lot of people, is intervene early in people's people's careers, because the sooner they're aware of their risks, the better they're able to manage them and mitigate them. Yes, sir.
I think the point that you made about, leveling with the team, is I had, my high risk, I did do that with the company I was at, in terms of, they kind of came up with a magic word that they would say when they knew that I was going overboard. And that would make me, stop, slow down, and get everybody back on board.
Absolutely. It also depersonalizes, right? Because it's not, what's this crazy John all about? It just sort of, we say, oh, there he is. This is this tendency, and everyone laughs about it and move on, but it works, right? It does. Yes, sir.
The other thing I thought of when we heard Harry Kramer speak a number of times at Northwestern, and in his book, and I think even in his presentation, one of the things that at first he didn't want to do, but now every year he goes on a retreat to kind of refocus where he is. But I thought another interesting thing in the book is at the end of the day, he looks back at the day and compares what did I achieve versus what I wanted to achieve, and now what am I going to do for the next day. So there's that's that slowing, an aspect of slowing yourself down, trying to just let reality talk to you if you can.
In some way or another. Go for a walk, hit golf balls. For me, that's what gets me into the zone to think, whatever works for you. Anything else? Listen, I hope I gave you some things to think about. I always enjoy talking on this topic, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you. Thank you very much.